Join me now, won't you, as we try to discover why exactly this book is considered a classic, as I haven't found out yet. Thus was Johnson employed during some of the best years of his life as a mere literary laborer, for gain, not glory, solely to obtain an honest support. He, however, indulged himself in occasional little sallies, which the French so happily are expressed by the term jeu d'esprit, and which will be noticed in their order in the progress of this work. But what first displayed his transcendent powers and gave the world assurance of the man was his London, a poem, an imitation of the third satire of Juvenal, which came out in May this year, that's 1738, and burst forth with a splendor, the rays of which will forever encircle his name. Boileau had imitated the same satire with great success, applying it to Paris, but an attentive comparison will satisfy every reader that he is much excelled by the English Juvenal. Oldham had also imitated it and applied it to London, all which performances concur to prove that great cities in every age and in every country will furnish similar topics of satire. Whether Johnson had previously read Oldham's imitation, I do not know, but it is not a little remarkable that there is scarcely any coincidence found between the two performances, though upon the very same subject. The only instances are in describing London as the sink of foreign worthlessness. I quote here, "The common shore where French does all her filth and order pour." That's Alderman. And Johnson, "the common shore of Paris and of Rome." And again, "No calling or profession comes amiss. A needy monsieur can be what he please." Oldham. Johnson, "All sciences a fasting monsieur knows." Sounds like he kind of ripped him off a little bit. The particulars which Oldham has collected, both exhibiting the horrors of London and of the times, contrasted with better days, are different from those of Johnson, and in general well chosen and well expressed. I own it pleased me to find amongst them one trait of the manner of the age of London in the last century, to shield from the sneer of English ridicule, which was some time ago too common a practice in my native city of Edinburgh. If what I've said can't from the town affright, consider other dangers of the night, when brickbats are from upper stories thrown, and emptied chamber pots come pouring down from garret windows. There are, in Oldham's imitation, much prosaic verses and bad rhymes, and his poem sets out with a strange, inadvertent blunder. Though much concerned to leave my dear old friend, I must, however, his design commend of fixing in the country. It is plain he was not going to leave his friend. His friend was going to leave him. The young lady at once corrected this with a good critical sagacity to, "Though much concerned to lose my dear old friend." There is one passage in the original better transfused by Oldham than by Johnson. Oh, I see. They're just... "Nil habet in fedex perpetuas durias in se, quam quod ridiculus homines facit," which is an exquisite remark on the galling meanness and contempt annexed by poverty. Johnson's imitation is, "Of all the griefs that harass the distressed, sure the most bitter is a scornful jest." Oldham, though less elegant, is more just. "Nothing in poverty so ill is born, and it's exposing men to graining scorn." Where and what manner this poem was composed, I am sorry that I neglected to ascertain with precision from Johnson's own authority. He has marked upon his corrected copy of the first edition of it, written in 1738. and as it was published in the month of May of that year, it is evident that much time was not employed in preparing it for the press. The history of its publication I am enabled to give it a very satisfactory manner, and judging for myself and many of my friends, I trust that it will not be uninteresting to my readers. Okay, I believe you. Let's see what's so not uninteresting. We may be certain, though it is not expressly named in the following letter to Mr. Cave in 1738, that they all relate to it. Now another letter to Mr. Cave. To Mr. Cave, Castle Street, Wednesday morning, no date, 1738. Sir, when I took the liberty of writing to you a few days ago, I did not expect a repetition of the same pleasure so soon. For a pleasure I shall always think it, to converse in any manner with an ingenious and candid man. But having the enclosed poem in my hands to dispose of for the benefit of the author, of whose abilities I shall say nothing since I send you his performance, I believe I could not procure more advantageous terms from any person than from you, who have so much distinguished yourself by your generous encouragement of poetry, and whose judgment of that art nothing but your commendation of my trifle can give me any occasion to call into question. Speaking of Johnson's Ode ad Urbanum, probably. I do not doubt but you will look over this poem with another eye, and reward it in a different manner, from a mercenary bookseller who counts the lines he is to purchase and considers nothing but the bulk. I cannot help taking notice that besides what the author may hope for an account of his abilities, he has likewise another claim to your regard, as he lies at present under very disadvantageous circumstances of fortune. I beg, therefore, that you will favor me with a letter tomorrow, that I may know what you can afford to allow him, that he may either part with you to you, or find out, which I do not expect, some other way more to his satisfaction. I have only to add that, as I am sensible I have transcribed it very coarsely, which, after having altered it, I was obliged to do. I will, if you please, to transmit the sheets from the press, correct it for you, and take the trouble of altering any stroke or satire which you may dislike. By exerting on this occasion your usual generosity, you will not only encourage learning and relieve distress, but, though it be a comparison of the other motives of very small account, oblige in a very sensible manner, sir, your very humble servant, Sam Johnson. Oh, another letter to Mr. Cave. To Mr. Cave, sir, spring 1738, Monday, No 6 Castle Street. I am to return your thanks for the present you were so kind as to send by me, and to entreat you will be pleased to inform me by the penny post whether you resolve to print the poem. If you please to send it to me by the post, with a note to Dodsley, I will go and read the lines to him, that we may have this consent to put his name on the title page. As to the printing, if it can be set immediately about, I will be so much the author's friend as not to content myself with the mere solicitations in his favor. I propose, in my calculation by near the truth, to engage for the reimbursement of all that you shall lose by an impression of 500. Provided, as you very generously propose, that the profit, if any, be set aside for the author's use, excepting the present you made, which, if he be a gainer, it is fit he should repay. I beg that you will let one of your servants write an exact account of the expense of such an impression, and send it with the poem, that I may know what I engage for. I am very sensible, from your generosity on this occasion, of your regard to learning, even at an unhappy estate, and cannot but think such a temper deserving of the gratitude of those who suffer so often from a contrary disposition. I am, sir, your most humble servant, Sam Johnson. I have to admit, I was not paying attention to what I was just reading then. I don't know what's going on. I'm going to take a little awkward silence here to figure it out. Okay, he's just talking about printing the poem. I'm going out to read it to some guy. Okay, and another letter now. Again to Mr. Cave, no date. Sir, I waited on you to take the copy to Dodsley's. As I remember the number of lines which it contains, it will be longer than Eugenio, a poem published in 1737, of which see an account under April 30th, 1773. We'll get to that later. It's going to be longer than that, with the quotations, which must be subjointed at the bottom of the page. Part of the beauty of the performance, if any beauty be allowed it, consisting in adapting Juvenal's sentiments to modern facts and persons. Very droll. It will, with those additions, very conveniently make 5 sheets. And since the expense will be no more, I shall contentedly insure it, as I mentioned in my last. So he's going to pay to get published, I guess. If it be not therefore gone to Dodsley's, I beg it may be sent me. So it says it may be sent me by the penny post, that I may have it in the evening. I have composed a Greek epigram to Eliza, the learned Mrs. Elizabeth Carter, and think she ought to be celebrated in many different languages as Louis le Grand. Pray send me word when you will begin upon the poem, for it is a long way to walk. I would leave my epigram, but have not daylight to transcribe it. I am, sir, yours, etc., Sam Johnson. All right. Another letter to Mr. Cave here. I think it's the last one. Sir, I am extremely obliged by your kind letter, and will not fail to attend your tomorrow with Irene, who looks upon you as one of her best friends. I was today with Mr. Dodsley, who declares very warmly in favor of the paper you sent him, which he desires to have a share in, it being, as he says, a credible thing to be concerned in. I knew not what answer to make till I had consulted you, nor what to demand on the author's part, but am very willing that, if you please, he should have a part in it, as he will undoubtedly be more diligent to disperse and promote it. If you can send me word tomorrow that I shall say what I shall say to him, I will settle matters and bring the poem with me for the press, which, as the town empties, we cannot be too quick with. I am, sir, yours, and etc., Sam Johnson. Okay. That was the part that Boswell was sure I would find interesting. To us who have long known the manly force, bold spirit, and masterly versification of this poem, it is a matter of curiosity to observe the diffidence with which its author brought it forward into public notice, while he is so cautious as not to avow it to be his own production. I noticed that. And with what humility he offers to allow the printer to alter any stroke of satire which he might dislike. That any such alteration was made, we do not know. If we did, we could not but feel an indignant regret. But how painful is it to see what a writer of such vigorous powers of mind was actually in such distress, that the small profit which so short a poem, however excellent, could yield, was courted as a relief. Just sad. It has been generally said, I know not with what truth, that Johnson offered his London to several booksellers, none of whom would purchase it. To this circumstance, Mr. Derrick alludes in the following lines of his Fortune a Rhapsody. Will no kind patron Johnson own? Shall Johnson friendless range the town? And every publisher refuse the offspring of his happy muse? But we have seen that the worthy, modest, and ingenious Mr. Robert Dodsley had taste enough to perceive its uncommon merit, and thought it credible to have its share in it. The fact is that, as a future conference, he bargained for the whole property of it, for which he gave Johnson 10 guineas, who told me, I might perhaps have accepted of less, but that Paul Whitehead had a little before got 10 guineas for a poem that I would not take less than Paul Whitehead. And I would not take less than Paul Whitehead. That's what I should have said. I may here observe that Johnson appeared to undervalue Paul Whitehead upon every occasion when he was mentioned, and in my opinion did not do him justice. But when it is considered that Paul Whitehead was a member of a riotous and profane club, we may account for Johnson having a prejudice against him. Paul Whitehead was indeed unfortunate in being not only slighted by Johnson, but violently attacked by Churchill, who utters the following imprecation. I think this is unrelated to the famous Churchill. May I, can worse disgrace on manhood fail, be born a Whitehead and baptized a Paul? Ooh, burn! Yet I shall never be persuaded to think meanly of the author of so brilliant and pointed a satire as Manners. Johnson's London was published in May 1738. Sir John Hawkins, which was mentioned on page 86, tells us the event is antedated in the poem of London, but in every particular except the difference of a year, what is there said in the departure of Thales must be understood of Savage and looked upon as true history. This conjecture is, I believe, entirely groundless. I have been assured that Johnson said he was not so much an acquaintance with Savage when he wrote his London. If the departure mentioned in it was the departure of Savage, the event was not antedated, but foreseen. For London was published in May 1738, and Savage did not set out for Wales. Talking about some nitty-gritty in this poem. Till July 1739. However, while Johnson could defend the credibility of Second Sight, he did not pretend that he himself was possessed of that faculty. Okay. Anyway, it was published in May 1738, and it is remarkable that it came out the same morning with Pope's satire entitled 1738, so that England had at once its Juvenal and Horace and poetical monitors. The Reverend Dr. Douglas, now Bishop of Salisbury, to whom I am indebted for some obliging communications, was then a student at Oxford and remembers well the effect which London produced. Everybody was delighted with it, and there being no name to it, the first buzz of the literary circles was, "Here is an unknown poet, greater even than Pope." And it is recorded in the Gentleman's Magazine of that year, page 26, 269, that it got to the second edition of the course of a week. One of the warmest patrons of this poem on its first appearance was General Oglethorpe, whose strong benevolence of soul was unabated during the course of a very long life, though it is painful to think that he had but too much reason to become cold and callous, and discontented with the world, from the neglect which he experienced of his public and private worth, by those in whose power it was so gratify so gallant a veteran with marks of distinction. This extraordinary person was as remarkable for his learning and taste as for his own eminent qualities. And no man was more prompt, active, and generous in encouraging merit. I have heard Johnson gratefully acknowledge in his presence the kind and effectual support which he gave to his London, though unacquainted with its author. Okay. I think I'm done for the day. Hope that helps you sleep. Till next time, see you in Boswell. Bye from Boswell.